Welcome to ETC number 2 on Postmodern Picture Books by Comeau. I have focused on 2 of the 3 books, Black and White by David McCulley and Wolves by Emily Gravett. Starting with Black and White by David McCulley, one can see that the colors on the cover do not convey the simple black and white colors, but also blue and green. This may cause confusion for the reader, as it indirectly indicates that black and white are not as simple as one may think, and the story does just this by bringing in 4 different stories for the reader to connect. My initial thoughts when I started to read Black and White was the confusion this picture book might bring by using the 4 different stories, but was still eager to find and make the connection. The warning label at the beginning of this book brings awareness to the reader that although they may see and read this book as separate stories, it may be just one story, giving the reader the freedom to interpret the book to his or her own personal connections. With the author placing this warning label at the beginning of the book sets it apart as a non-traditional read. Books generally do not come with this type of warning for its readers. This in itself identifies the chaos that Pantaleão speaks of when she identifies that postmodern and metafiction includes narrative fragmentation, as this book is fragmented into 4 different stories, and disorder and chaos, as is shown in each of the stories. The layout of the book goes against traditional reading expectations by creating the various stories that appear. This often causes frustration with the reader trying to connect the pieces of the puzzle, and this non-traditional method pushes the reader to become more active in their interpretive role, as mentioned by McCullum in Pantaleão's article. The first story, Seeing Things, is created with light earth tones, and the pictures are not always clear, suggesting that the boy is perhaps dreaming of all the realities in his own life, or that things are not always easily understood. The pale blue that is used throughout this particular story suggests a dreamlike serenity. The gloomy, various shades of black, white, and brown used in problem parents seem to always cast a shadow that suggests nothing is really clear when it comes to understanding parents and their choices. Although the pictures can be clearly identified to know what is happening in the story, connecting to the fact that the boy is aware of what the parents are doing, the yellowish, brownish hue is to suggest that the boy just doesn't understand why his parents do what they do. The waiting game picture background remains the same throughout the story, with the exception of the people. The author uses bright primary colors with clear angular lines suggesting rigidness and orderliness, as Nodelman and Reimer explain in Chapter 12 of Picture Books. And utter chaos would be symbolic to the other 3 stories, as the more chaotic each story becomes, the more chaotic the appearance of the Holstein cows become. As each story progresses, one can no longer identify the beginning or the end of the cows, much like the other stories seem to develop into chaos as well, and how the reader gets caught up in the now and loses sight of the beginning or the end, for that matter, both trying to make sense of what is happening. Pantaleão defines non-traditional as a characteristic of metafiction, and Black and White carry this characteristic by creating a non-traditional plot structure and involving the reader to construct meaning of the story through both pictures and word. Pantaleão also writes that most children and youth of today live in a multimedia and multimodal world characterized by fragmentation, juxtaposition of differing forms, and an ever-increasing diversity of symbolic representations. With students browsing the internet looking at multiple sites at the same time, this may seem very much the norm for them, making sense of various internet platforms and bringing them all together to create one meaning or understanding, like the story of Black and White, 4 stories do equal 1. This picture book will attract adolescents as they will be drawn to its openness to interpretation, its complexity, and its coy and playful way of messing with the mind of the reader in a forgivable way. You can read it as 4 distinct stories, or you can try to tie it into one cohesive whole, as the author suggested in the beginning with his warning label. In doing so, chances are you will begin to see that it's not quite as simple as all that. The fun in this book is in trying to find the ways to tie all the stories together. I think that most children can do it, and most adults will struggle until they make the connection and realization that this book does not tell its stories in a traditional way. Now let's move on to Wolves by Emily Gravett. Intertextuality, as Pantaleão states, refers to connections between text and illustrations and cultural knowledge and artifacts such as other texts, television, media, video, other characters, works of art, advertisements, and sayings. Wolves seem to fit this definition. For me, wolves immediately brought to mind Little Red Riding Hood, and there are significant symbols throughout the story that allow this connection to be made. For example, Red Rabbit reads from a red book, and Little Red Riding Hood wears a red cloak. As Rabbit reads the meaning of wolf, he still feels a sense of safety, as Red Riding Hood did when she encountered the wolf the first time. While the wolf in Red Riding Hood disguised himself in clothes, the wolf in this book is disguised within the red book that Rabbit is reading, and later we see the wolf disguised in clothing as well. Of course, the most obvious is the end where the big bad wolf eats Red Riding Hood. Rabbit is also eaten by the wolf. With various interpretations and endings of Red Riding Hood, Gravett included two possible variations within this book. Of course, the latter is definitely the more favorable of the two. The book itself contains a lot of little additives, making it seem more realistic to the reader. It contains the card using the Dewey Decimal System, checkout and due dates, where the library has a page to stamp the dates, as well as some personalized items at the back with advertisements and letters, allowing the book to become more realistic to the reader. Nodelman and Reimer, in Chapter 12 of Picture Book, gives the reader insight on how to better read pictures to gain better understanding of the story being told. With that said, while the rabbit reads his book to the reader, us, he is safely located at the bottom right-hand side, while the pictures and words of what he reads are located in solid borders, giving the illusion the rabbit's safe. The wolves, while confined within borders, are portrayed as dark and vicious. In relation to Nodelman and Reimer's definition of size, when it comes to picture books, this is evident in wolves. As the story progresses, the wolf becomes larger, giving a more threatening feel to the story, as though he has come to life. It is identifying the relationship between the rabbit narrator that the wolf has entered the rabbit's world. This inevitably is a threat to the rabbit. At one point in the book, the wolf steps outside of the book and is dressed in disguise. Again, the connection with Little Red Riding Hood. Rabbit remains very unaware of this, but the wolf clearly has his eyes on Rabbit. The wolf, like Rabbit, now has a shadow, which indicates that they are both in the same world. While the location of Rabbit changes to the lower left side of the book, the wolf retreats back within the border, suggesting that the rabbit is once again safe. Not that the rabbit ever thought he was in danger to begin with. The wolf in this picture appears as large and aggressive and once again in disguise. The dark shading of the wolf suggests evil or danger. Nodelman and Reimer also write about overlap, and as we near the end of the story, we see that the two characters are beginning to overlap one another. Rabbit and wolf are clearly in the same world, but Rabbit is very unaware of this. As Rabbit travels from the tail to the tip of the nose on the wolf, the reader is aware that the rabbit is walking directly into dangerous territory. The lines that are used to draw the wolf are straight and spiky, suggesting a nervous energy, allowing the reader to identify a threat for Rabbit. In the end, as Rabbit reads his final words, it is then that he becomes aware that it is too late for the danger he read himself into. However, the author gives the reader another option to a happy ending of friendship if the first ending was too much for the reader. I enjoyed how the author allowed the reader, Rabbit, to bring the written word to life. When reading, we often imagine the words coming to life, and here the author shows just that in her book, Wolves. Black and White and Wolves allowed me to dive in with a deeper understanding of postmodernism and the impact the picture books can have on a reader. As we often assume that picture books belong in the children's literature section, there is no doubt that these two books can be used for young adults as well. This is a great opportunity to identify the different levels of thinking and connections among the children, young adults, as well as adults. And to end, the true beauty of the words and the pictures is that there is much room for interpretation. Thank you.